He walked into the courtroom in a faded military jacket. No lawyer, no allies, just a promise he made to a struggling single mother. Everyone laughed until he spoke. What no one knew, he was once the most feared legal mind in the Marines. And now he's about to expose a multi-million-dollar housing fraud that reaches all the way to the judge's bench. The courtroom was too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace, more like a breath held too long before the plunge. A gust of air stirred the faded American flag beside the judge's bench, and the fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. But no one moved. All eyes were on the man standing at the defendant's table. He wore a worn, olive-green military jacket. It clung to his shoulders, like it still remembered the deserts, the rain, and the weight of lives once carried. His boots, though polished, showed their age in every crease. His name was Caleb West, a single dad, a handyman, and at least today, an unlicensed attorney in a courtroom that had no patience for drama. From the bench, Judge Ronald Patterson leaned forward. A man known for his sarcasm and theatrical flair, Patterson was built more like a television host than a judge. His black robes swept dramatically as he placed both hands on the edge of the bench, narrowing his eyes at Caleb like a cat sizing up a mouse. Well, the judge drawled his voice thick with mockery. "This is a first. A mechanic walks into my courtroom and thinks he's Perry Mason." Laughter rippled across the gallery. Caleb didn't flinch. Sitting behind him was a petite woman in her 30s, Teresa Carter. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her fingers tightly gripping the strap of her worn purse. And next to her, her 6-year-old son clung to her arm like a vine to a tree in a storm. Caleb glanced back at them for the briefest moment. Then he turned to face Patterson again. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "I am representing Ms. Carter today, under California Civil Code, Paragraph 86. I am not charging her. I am not collecting a fee. I am here solely to protect her from an unlawful eviction." Patterson snorted. "Protect her?" He leaned back in his chair, scoffing. From what landlord paperwork, more laughter. The opposing attorney, a young, slick-haired man in an expensive blue suit. Jason Cole chimed in. "Your Honor, we object to this entire proceeding. Mr. West is not a licensed practicing attorney. He has no standing here. This is nothing but a sideshow." Caleb waited. Not a single twitch of muscle betrayed emotion. Then he stepped forward, placed a folder on the podium before him, and opened it. "Your Honor," he began, calm as a still lake. "The lease agreement provided by the plaintiff has 5 separate violations of state tenant law. 3 relate to unlawful entry. 1 relates to the illegal withholding of maintenance services. And the 5th, he flipped a page, his voice firm now sharper, is a forged signature on the notice to vacate dated May 12th. Ms. Carter was in the hospital with pneumonia that day. Medical records are here. Her son's teacher submitted a signed affidavit confirming she was absent from school pickup, and video footage from the building's security camera also included shows that the notice was taped to her door at 3:42 p.m. by a maintenance worker, not the building owner, as legally required." The room shifted. The gallery quieted. Even Jason Cole stopped typing. Judge Patterson leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Are you saying the eviction notice was falsified?" Caleb looked up. "I'm saying the notice wasn't just falsified, Your Honor. I'm saying it was part of a pattern." He pulled another sheet from the folder. "This is the 3rd family evicted by the same landlord in 9 months each time through a forged document. All in rent-controlled units. All replaced within weeks by new tenants paying double." A long pause. Patterson adjusted his glasses. "You have evidence, I do, and I'll submit it through the appropriate discovery process." Jason Cole jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. This man is not an officer of the court. He's a handyman with a hero complex." "Objection noted," Patterson muttered. But he was staring at Caleb now. The mockery was gone. For a moment, the judge seemed to be measuring something heavier than facts, like integrity maybe, or purpose, or pain. Caleb stood still, hands resting lightly on the podium. The courtroom wasn't quiet now, out of contempt. It was quiet out of curiosity. No one knew quite what to make of him. A janitor, a veteran, a single father trying to play lawyer, or something more. From the back row, a woman whispered, "Who is this guy?" Patterson cleared his throat. "We'll take a 15-minute recess. When we return, Mr. West will provide a formal response to the motion to dismiss." Bang! The gavel came down harder than necessary. People stood and murmured, but Teresa remained seated, staring at Caleb like he'd just pulled her back from a cliff. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Caleb turned to her. His voice was quiet. "Because you remind me of someone I couldn't save." She didn't ask who. He walked past her toward the hallway. In the far corner, a boy, about 9 years old, peeked around a column Emma, his daughter, was watching from the visitor's side. Her oversized denim jacket swallowed her frame, and her sketchpad was tucked under her arm. She gave him a tiny nod. He smiled softly. And then he was gone. The courtroom exhaled, but something had shifted. A veteran had stepped into a war zone again, not for glory, but for justice. And no one, least of all the judge, was ready for what was coming next. Long before Caleb West stood in a courtroom defending a stranger, he had stood in a very different kind of war zone. Not one with gavels and statutes, but with sand blood and radio static. 16 years ago, he had worn the same olive green jacket not out of nostalgia, but because it was the only thing that still fit him from that past life. The sleeves had been restitched by his late wife. The left shoulder bore a faint scorched patch from a night no one talked about, and inside the collar faded black letters read LT. C. West, JAG Corp, USMC. Back then, Caleb wasn't just a Marine. He was the legal backbone of his unit, a judge advocate general who defended and prosecuted cases for soldiers who rarely understood the rules they were asked to die under. He had walked men back from court-martials and walked others to them. He had stared into the eyes of war criminals and war heroes alike. And he had won. All of them. 42 cases. No losses. But even victory wears heavy when it comes with handcuffs or folded flags. The day his wife Lena died was the day he walked away from everything. A simple infection, an emergency call, a misrouted ambulance, and a 27-minute delay. By the time he reached the hospital, the light in Lena's eyes was gone, and the world felt like it had dropped out from under him. He resigned his commission. He boxed up his law degrees. He took his daughter Emma, then just 3 years old, and moved to a quiet town with broken sidewalks and kind neighbors, a place where no one asked questions, where he could work with his hands and feel useful without carrying anyone's fate. He became the guy you called when your faucet leaked, when your porch light blinked, or when your radio refused to work, and he was good at it. Honest, quiet, efficient. But even as he fixed everyone else's problems, his own remained packed in a locked drawer beside his bed, along with his JAG badge and a creased photograph of Lena smiling in the sun. Then, 2 months ago, he met Teresa Carter. She stood outside the hardware store on a rainy Tuesday, clutching a grocery bag and her son's backpack. She looked lost. Not the kind of lost that comes from forgetting directions, but the kind that comes from losing safety. From knowing home is no longer home. She asked if he knew anyone who could fix a jammed door. He did. But when he got to her apartment, he realized the problem wasn't a door. It was Reynolds, the landlord, a squat man with expensive cologne and paper-thin excuses. He'd been illegally locking out tenants, bullying single moms with late-night visits, and manipulating lease terms under the radar. And Teresa? She was just the next in line. He didn't mean to get involved, but he saw the eviction notice taped to her door, its ink smudged from the rain. He saw her son sleeping on a worn couch, surrounded by boxes. And he heard the fear in her voice when she whispered, "I don't have anywhere else to go." That night, Caleb pulled open the drawer he hadn't touched in 6 years. He took out the JAG certificate, the license still active, the documents he had never canceled, not out of hope, but because he didn't want to admit that part of him was gone. The law hadn't abandoned him. He had abandoned it. And maybe it was time to go back. At the small kitchen table in their rented duplex, Emma sat swinging her legs beneath the chair. Her sketch pad lay open, covered in half-drawn stars and stick-figure judges with cartoonish frowns. "Are you going to court tomorrow?" she asked, not looking up. Caleb poured tea into a chipped mug. "Yes." She paused. "Like, actually court with a judge and everything?" "Yeah, with a judge and everything." She looked at him now, eyes wide. "You're wearing that jacket again." He glanced down. "It's clean." "That's not what I meant," she said softly. He set the mug down and crouched beside her, meeting her eyes. "You remember why I stopped being a lawyer?" Emma nodded slowly. "Because you were too sad." He smiled, bittersweet. "That's not wrong." "Are you still sad?" Caleb inhaled. "Sometimes." Emma tilted her head. "Then why are you helping her?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed to her sketch pad. "What's that?" She showed him the drawing. It was a courtroom from a child's view, big chair for the judge, tiny table for the defendant. A small figure stood alone. "That's you," she said. "You look small." "I am small compared to the system." "But you have me," she added, beaming. "That makes you bigger," he laughed, and for the first time in a long time it didn't hurt. Later that night, Caleb spread out documents across the kitchen table. Building codes, tenant rights, should regulations, county housing violations. The law was like a language he hadn't spoken in years, but muscle memory returned. His mind began to snap into form, like a soldier cleaning a rifle after too long in storage. He annotated, highlighted, cross-referenced. And somewhere, as the night deepened, the tired old house lit with purpose. Teresa had texted him once. "Are you sure you want to do this?" His reply was simple. "It's not about wanting. It's about needing to do what's right." Back in the courtroom, Judge Patterson likely still thought he was a joke. But Caleb West was never one to shout his credentials. He let his actions speak louder than his scars. And for the first time in years, he was stepping back into battle not for medals or pride, but because someone needed defending. And because somewhere in the front row, a little girl was drawing stars for him again. The courthouse steps were still wet from the morning rain, glistening like polished stone under the gray sky. Caleb stood there for a moment, feeling the cold breeze slip beneath his jacket collar. Behind him, the courthouse doors thudded shut, swallowing the echoes of heels, voices, and tension that had filled the courtroom just moments earlier. He could still hear the judge's voice in his head, that mocking tone, the laughter. And yet what rang loudest was the silence that had followed his presentation. The tide had shifted, but tides didn't stay still. And he knew a storm often came after the calm. He walked down the steps slowly, his hands tucked in his pockets, his shoulders squared as though still carrying a rucksack from his old life. As he reached the parking lot, he saw Teresa standing beside her car, arms folded tight across her chest. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice brittle. Caleb gave a small nod. Better than they expected. She gave a tight, nervous laugh. "You did more in 15 minutes than my last lawyer did in 3 months. I've had practice," he said. Then softer. "Don't thank me yet." She looked at him, then really looked. "Why are you doing this, Caleb?" You don't even know me." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past her at the skyline of the city rising beyond the courthouse. Cold, impersonal buildings, like metal towers watching from afar. "Because the system bets on silence," he finally said. "It thrives on people being too tired or too afraid to fight. But once in a while, someone pushes back. I used to be one of those people. You still are." He turned to her. "Then let's make it count." That night, Caleb sat at his kitchen table surrounded by a wall of case files. Teresa had given him access to everything: her lease bank statements, photos of the mold. She had complained about text messages from the landlord and the original eviction notice. He had seen this pattern before, but something about it bothered him more than usual details that didn't add up. For instance, the signature on the eviction notice. It matched Reynolds's scrawl too perfectly, like it had been pasted in. And then the timing: why serve a notice the exact day Teresa was hospitalized? Coincidence, or was someone watching? Caleb leaned back, rubbing his temple. He was starting to see the faint outline of something bigger. A pattern, a strategy. He reached into the file cabinet beside the table and pulled out a worn black notebook, his old JAG case journal. The spine cracked as he opened it. Inside were names he hadn't spoken in years. Soldiers, lawyers, patterns, mistakes, lessons learned the hard way. He flipped to a blank page. Reynolds, strategy map, pattern of eviction, low-income single-parent tenants. Timing, always following missed maintenance requests. Replacement tenants, higher-income corporate leaseholders. Potential connection to shell companies. He tapped the pen against the table. This wasn't just one greedy landlord. It smelled like a system, a quiet, calculated one, the kind people didn't notice until it crushed them. He sighed and reached for his tea, now cold. A soft knock sounded behind him. "Hey, Dad." Emma peeked around the doorway, holding her sketch pad like a shield. Her cheeks were flushed from brushing her teeth, and a few strands of hair clung to her forehead. "Still working?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Just finishing up." She walked in slowly and placed her sketch pad on the table, flipping it open. "I made something." The drawing was simple, but telling. It showed a man, Caleb, standing in front of a big judge's bench. The judge had a mean, squiggly mouth and huge eyebrows. But Caleb looked tall, strong, and behind him a small girl holding up a heart. "I watched you today," Emma said. "I couldn't hear everything, but you didn't sound scared." Caleb looked at the drawing, then at her. "Were you scared?" she asked. He thought for a long moment. "I wasn't scared of them," he said. "I was scared of losing again." She frowned. "Like when Mom died." He nodded. Emma crawled into his lap without another word. Her head rested against his chest, and he held her there, steady and warm. After a while, she said, "You're fighting again, aren't you?" Caleb's hand stilled on her back. He didn't know how to answer. But she looked up at him with those steady, knowing eyes, eyes too wise for her age, and whispered, "Just promise you'll come back." He kissed the top of her head. "I promise." At midnight, long after Emma had fallen asleep, Caleb sat on the edge of his bed, holding the old Marine Corps medallion Lena had once framed. On the back, in tiny engraved script, were the words, "Be the shelter. Be the shield." It had been Lena's phrase, her belief in what his duty meant, not just to the Corps, but to the world. He hadn't worn the uniform in years. But tonight, the oath felt alive again. He wasn't returning to law for ambition. He wasn't stepping into court for revenge. He was doing it because someone had to. Because somewhere out there, someone like Teresa was being cornered. And someone like Emma was watching. The next morning, the courtroom filled quicker than usual. There was a buzz in the air, half anticipation, half amusement. Word had gotten around that the handyman lawyer was back representing a single mother pro bono. The clerk even whispered, It had the makings of a real show. Judge Patterson entered with the same theatrical flair, his black robes flaring slightly, as he took the bench and adjusted his spectacles with exaggerated disdain. His gavel struck once, and the room stilled. "Let's resume the matter of Carter versus Reynolds Property Group," he announced, barely hiding his boredom. Caleb's stud jacket freshly brushed his notes, neatly ordered in the worn leather folder he had used since his JAG days. It didn't sparkle like the slick silver briefcase Jason Cole carried, but it held something far more dangerous: precision, discipline, and truth. Jason Cole rose with a confident smirk and buttoned his suit jacket with flair. "Your Honor," he began, already slipping into his well-practiced cadence. "As stated in our motion, the defendant's representative, Mr. Caleb West, is unlicensed, untrained, and unqualified to speak before this court. We renew our request for immediate dismissal on procedural grounds." The judge tilted his head. "Mr. West, your response." Caleb stepped forward calmly. "Your Honor, the motion assumes I'm presenting this case as legal counsel. I'm not. I am here under California Civil Procedure Code, Pub 367.3, which allows individuals to represent tenants in housing disputes without compensation if acting in good faith." Cole laughed loudly. The sound cut through the room like cheap glass breaking. "I'm sorry," Cole said, shaking his head. "Are we really going to pretend this is good faith? This man, this handyman, is quoting procedural codes like he's a bar exam tutor." More laughter echoed from the back row. A couple of junior paralegals nudged each other and chuckled. Patterson didn't stop them. Caleb didn't flinch. Instead, he opened his folder and pulled out a stack of carefully arranged documents. "This," he said, calmly, "is a detailed breakdown of Ms. Carter's lease, the landlord's maintenance records, and sworn statements from 4 other tenants in the same building. All filed legally, all notarized, and all describing a near-identical pattern of harassment lockouts and lease manipulation." He held up another paper. "This is an email from Reynolds Property Group's assistant property manager, accidentally CC'd to Ms. Carter, in which she refers to her as, and I quote, 'another soft target for conversion.'" Patterson raised an eyebrow. Caleb's voice didn't rise, but it gained weight with every word. "And this," he continued, "is a building inspection report from 2 months ago, before the eviction was filed, showing unrepaired black mold, which Ms. Carter reported 6 times over 12 weeks. All ignored." Jason Cole cleared his throat. "Irrelevant. The eviction notice was lawful and signed." Caleb didn't blink. "I'll get to the signature." For the next 20 minutes, Caleb laid out his opening presentation, not with flair or dramatics, but with surgical precision. He navigated the building code violations, the timeline, inconsistencies, the false maintenance logs, and the predatory history of similar evictions across other Reynolds-owned buildings. The courtroom that had once laughed began to shift. The junior paralegal stopped whispering. Judge Patterson leaned forward, reading along with the exhibits. Cole grew fidgety, flipping through his own documents like he'd suddenly realized he'd come unarmed to a duel. At one point, the judge interrupted. "Mr. West, are you saying there's a systemic pattern of fraudulent eviction tactics by the plaintiff?" Caleb looked up, his voice firm. "Yes, Your Honor. And I intend to prove it." Jason Cole stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is all speculative. He's pulling strings together like he's writing a novel." "Let's not be disrespectful," Patterson muttered, but his tone had lost its mockery. Then, almost too casually, the judge asked, "Out of curiosity, Mr. West, what's your background? You don't argue like someone who just reads housing codes for fun." Caleb paused. A hush fell over the room. "I served as a JAG attorney in the United States Marine Corps," he said simply. 16 years, 42 cases. No losses." The room froze. Patterson stared at him. Jason Cole's jaw stiffened, and somewhere in the back a woman whispered, "Wait, he's a military lawyer." Caleb didn't bask in it. He didn't gloat. He simply returned to his folder and pulled out a letter. "If the court requires verification, this is my certificate of good standing issued by the state bar. My license remains active, though I haven't practiced professionally in several years." Patterson took the paper and scanned it carefully. "I see," he said almost to himself. Then he looked up. "Well, Mr. West, you certainly have our attention now." When the session recessed for lunch, the courtroom buzzed not with ridicule, but with curiosity and disbelief. Caleb gathered his papers quietly. Teresa came up behind him, her hands shaking slightly. "You didn't tell me," she whispered. "Didn't think it mattered," he replied. "But you're a real lawyer, a war lawyer." "I used to be," he said. "Today I'm just someone trying to do the right thing." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're more than that, Caleb." He didn't answer. Outside the courtroom, Caleb saw Emma waiting near the fountain sketchpad in her lap. She looked up, eyes searching his face. "Did they laugh at you again?" "A little," he said with a smirk. "But then they listened." Emma grinned. "I knew they would." Caleb tousled her hair gently. He knew this was just the beginning. The system didn't go down because of one strong argument. It fought back, and he needed to be ready. After lunch, the air inside the courtroom had shifted. The laughter was gone. In its place lingered a brittle kind of silence, one that held both uncertainty and unease. Everyone had returned to their seats a little straighter, a little quieter. The handyman they'd mocked that morning now carried a new shadow behind him. Marine. Jag. 42 wins. No losses. Even Jason Cole's voice had dropped half a tone as he organized his stack of counter-motions. Judge Patterson returned to the bench with his usual sternness, but something had changed in his eyes. There was no trace of that earlier smirk. He cleared his throat, tapped the gavel once, and nodded. "We'll resume proceedings." Caleb stood buttoning the second-hand blazer he'd borrowed from a neighbor for this case. He didn't wear it for appearances. He wore it because it gave others one less excuse not to listen. Jason Cole rose too. "Your Honor." He began clearing his throat louder than necessary in light of Mr. West's recent revelations. The defense would like to formally challenge his standing. While he claims to be a licensed attorney, his professional record hasn't been verified, and he hasn't practiced law in a formal capacity for, what did he say? 6 years. Cole's voice was coated in false courtesy. The audience recognized it for what it was: desperation in designer rapping. "I move that Mr. West be barred from acting in any legal or representative capacity, and that all prior testimony or submissions be stricken from the record." Judge Patterson turned his gaze to Caleb. "Mr. West." Your response. Caleb walked to the podium slowly and pulled from his case folder a slim black binder. He opened it carefully, like it was something sacred, not because of what it was, but because of what it had cost him to keep. "Your Honor," he said calmly. "This binder contains the following: my JAG certification signed by Commandant Paulson, my honorable discharge, documents 2 letters of recommendation, one from a federal district judge, and one from my former JAG superior, and a current certificate of good standing from the State Bar of California." He paused, eyes steady. "I am not seeking compensation. I am not acting as formal counsel. I am, however, operating fully within the legal allowances of the Tenant Advocacy Exception and Small Claims Housing Relief Act, Sections 117 and 367(3). He handed the binder to the bailiff, who brought it up to the bench. Patterson flipped through it slowly, page by page. The room was dead silent. Caleb stood tall, shoulders squared, but not proud. There was no need for pride. He wasn't proving anything to the court. He was proving something to himself. After several long moments, the judge set the binder down. "This is extremely thorough," he said almost grudgingly. "More organized than some active practitioners I've seen this month." Jason Cole forced a tight smile. "Still, Your Honor." Legal standing aside, he hasn't been in court in years. He's emotionally compromised. He has personal history with loss, and now he's throwing himself into this case like it's personal. At that, Caleb finally turned to face him. His voice was still calm. But there was steel underneath. "Everything about this is personal, Mr. Cole. For you, it's billable hours. For me, it's about keeping a roof over a child's head." A rustle moved through the gallery like a wind. The judge raised a hand. "That's enough." He sat back in his chair, tapping the binder with one finger. "Mr. West's credentials are valid. He may proceed as a legal tenant advocate under California statute. The motion to dismiss his standing is denied." Cole sat down sharply. Patterson wasn't done, and furthermore, he continued. "Based on preliminary evidence submitted, the court finds sufficient cause to begin formal review of Reynolds Property Group's housing practices. This is no longer a routine eviction case. We will begin discovery." Whispers erupted in the back rows. Teresa Carter gasped, covering her mouth. Jason Cole looked like he'd just swallowed something sharp. Caleb remained still. But inside, beneath years of silence and grief and a carefully protected life, something stirred. Not triumph, not vengeance, just purpose. Later that day, as people filed out, the courtroom buzzed with new energy. Some nodded toward Caleb as they passed. Others whispered, "That's him, the Marine lawyer." Reporters hovered at the entrance, hoping for a quote. He gave none. Outside, the sky had turned a soft gold as afternoon faded. Caleb found Emma sitting on the courthouse steps, her sketchpad open again. "Did you win?" she asked. He sat beside her and looked out across the parking lot. "Not yet." She glanced up. "But you didn't lose." He smiled. "That's right. Not today." Emma held up the latest page of her sketchbook. It showed a tiny house with a big shield in front of it. On the shield, the word "truth" was written in purple crayon. "I made this for Miss Teresa," she said, "to keep her house safe." Caleb looked down at it, and for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't just defending a home. He was rebuilding one. 3 days after the judge approved discovery, the air around Caleb West's life began to change. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow tightening, like a noose disguised as routine. Calls went unanswered. Records vanished from the housing board's public portal. And Teresa Carter's former neighbors, who had initially promised affidavits, began to fall silent. One woman left town unexpectedly. Another had forgotten what she'd seen. And the third, she came home to find her car, windows smashed, and a single word spray-painted on her garage: "Liar." The message was clear: back off. At his kitchen table, Caleb sat with Teresa and his old friend Aaron Reyes, a former Marine signals specialist turned cybersecurity analyst. "I've traced Reynolds' business holdings," Aaron said, pointing to a chart on Caleb's laptop. "They're not operating as Reynolds Property Group. That's just a storefront." He tapped 3 red lines connecting between shell companies and offshore accounts. "Here's the real structure: 8 LLCs, each registered under different names, funneled through a Delaware holding trust and a foreign entity based in the Caymans." "Classic laundering structure," Caleb muttered. Aaron nodded. "They use forced evictions to empty rent-controlled units, then lease the same properties under new shell company names at triple price. The profits don't go through U.S. taxation." Caleb leaned forward. "And the city's housing board, paid off or intimidated. I wouldn't expect much help there." Teresa looked overwhelmed. "What does that mean for my case?" Caleb glanced at her, voice steady. "It means you're not the only victim. And if we can show this is part of a larger fraud operation, your case becomes criminal, not just civil. And more dangerous, Aaron added bluntly. Teresa swallowed. So, what do we do? Caleb didn't hesitate. We go louder. We go smarter. And we don't blink. But the enemy blinked first. 2 days later, Caleb was walking Emma to school when he noticed a man in a tan trench coat standing across the street near a construction van. The man wasn't doing anything, just leaning on the van, sipping coffee. Watching. The same man showed up that afternoon at the grocery store, and again the next day parked outside the library, where Emma attended her sketching class. At 2:13 p.m., Caleb crossed the street, walked directly up to the man and looked him in the eye. "You're not very subtle," Caleb said calmly. The man smirked. "Didn't know I was supposed to be." "Who sent you?" "Just a guy doing his job. Name's Lucas Harper. Private investigator." "For Reynolds." "They're nervous." Caleb took a step closer, his voice low. "You follow my daughter again, and I promise you'll have more to worry about than nervous clients." Lucas didn't flinch, but there was a flicker, just a split-second flash of something in his eyes. Respect, or maybe recognition. "You used to be military," Harper said. "I can tell." Caleb's jaw tensed. "That was a long time ago. Doesn't go away," Harper said, almost like it was an apology. Then he took a final sip of coffee, dropped the cup, and walked away. That night, Caleb reviewed everything again. He marked connections between shell companies, old case files, payment trails. But his eyes kept drifting toward the window, half expecting to see headlights slowing down, cameras flashing, shadows lurking. Emma had gone to sleep, clutching her sketchbook, unaware that her world was starting to attract predators. He needed to act, not just react. The next day in court, Caleb arrived with a different kind of folder. Inside were printed wire transfers between shell companies, subpoena requests for building code violation reports, and a map of evictions conducted by Reynolds Properties over the past 18 months. When his turn came, he rose to speak. "Your Honor, the defense is prepared to show not just predatory eviction practices, but a coordinated effort to defraud the city of Los Angeles through a network of shell companies and falsified occupancy records." Judge Patterson blinked. "You're accusing the plaintiff of real estate fraud." "Yes, sir, and I've filed a formal request to escalate the case to include the district attorney's office for review." Jason Cole laughed, but it lacked conviction this time. "This is absurd," Cole muttered. "Your Honor, this is theater. He's waving spreadsheets like they're hand grenades." Caleb didn't look at him. He stared straight at Patterson. Sometimes truth needs to make noise. Patterson didn't smile, but he also didn't stop him. After court adjourned, Caleb was walking down the marble hallway when Lucas Harper stepped out from behind a column. "You've got guts," he said. Caleb kept walking. "I mean it," Harper called after him. "You're poking a bear. Reynolds has people on the payroll you wouldn't believe." Caleb stopped, then turned. "You came to warn me," Harper hesitated, then nodded. "I've done some things I'm not proud of," he said. "But following a little girl to school, that wasn't part of the job I signed up for." He handed Caleb a flash drive. "What's this?" "Everything they didn't want you to see. Transaction records, memos, internal photos. They used to think I was loyal. And you're not," Harper shrugged. "I used to be a Marine too, before things went sideways." Caleb stared at him for a long moment. "You know this puts you in danger." "Yeah," Harper said. "But I'd rather be in danger than ashamed." He turned to go. Lucas Caleb called after him. The man stopped. "Thank you." Harper gave a slight nod, then disappeared into the crowd. That night, Caleb copied the flash drive and locked it in a small safe under the floorboards. Then he kissed Emma goodnight, and sat alone on the front porch, the night thick with shadows and a scent of pine. He held Lena's old medal in his hand, thumb brushing the words carved into the back. Be the shelter. Be the shield. He wasn't sure how this would end, but he was sure of one thing: wasn't alone anymore, and the system was about to learn something they'd forgotten. A Marine doesn't retreat. A father never surrenders. It was supposed to be just another Thursday afternoon, the kind where Caleb West picked up his daughter from the community center after her art class, grabbed some groceries, and returned home in time to reheat leftovers and study court documents while she sketched at the kitchen table. But that day, something changed. Emma was waiting for him on the steps of the center, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder, and her sketch pad clutched tight in both hands. She looked up when he called her name, but she didn't run into his arms like usual. She just held out her drawing. Dad, I think I saw something weird today. In the car, Caleb glanced at the paper while the engine idled. It was a child sketch, crude but observant. A man in a brown jacket was handing a small envelope to another man near the courthouse doors. The facial details were minimal circles, for head stick arms, but the gestures were unmistakable. The envelope was drawn mid-transfer, frozen in motion. Above the scene, Emma had written in blocky purple letters, "Court lunch break, Wednesday." Caleb's stomach dropped. He remembered Wednesday. It was the day Patterson had ruled in favor of full discovery. The day Jason Cole had looked visibly shaken for the first time. The day Harper had reappeared. And now, here was his daughter unknowingly sketching what might be a bribe. He turned to her, voice calm. "Where were you sitting when you drew this?" Emma pointed to the second-floor window of the community center. "Ms. Denise let me stay inside because it was hot. I was drawing the birds at first. Then I saw those guys and thought they looked sneaky." Caleb's hands gripped the wheel tighter. "You did good, baby. Really good." She tilted her head. "Did I draw something bad?" "No," he said softly. "You drew the truth." That night, he scanned the image and emailed it to Aaron with the subject line, "Need camera match. Urgent." Aaron responded 20 minutes later. "I'm on it. There's a city traffic cam 20 feet from the community center, angled directly at the courthouse plaza. If it caught what she drew, it'll be time-stamped." 3 hours later, Caleb had the footage. At 12:47 p.m. on Wednesday, a man in a tan jacket approached one of Reynolds's building inspectors, a man scheduled to testify the following week on behalf of the property group. A small white envelope changed hands. No words, no signatures, just a handoff. But the angle was perfect, clear, undeniable. He cross-referenced it with a staff directory and inspection records. The man receiving the envelope was David Smalls, an inspector with a history of inconclusive reports, and an unexplained deposit of $9,700 into his account 2 days earlier. The footage combined with Emma's sketch created a narrative that couldn't be ignored. A child had seen what trained adults missed, and a system built on shadows had just been touched by the light of innocence. The next morning, Caleb walked into the courthouse carrying 2 folders, one for the judge and one for the future. He submitted the footage and the financial report to the court clerk, along with a declaration requesting an emergency evidentiary hearing. Jason Cole was already in the courtroom straightening his tie when he saw the paperwork. His face blanched. He leaned toward Caleb as he passed. "You're really going to base this on a kid's drawing?" Caleb didn't look at him. "No, I'm basing this on what the drawing led to. The footage, the deposit, the lie." Cole's lips tightened. "You're making this personal." Caleb finally turned his voice low. "You followed my daughter. You threatened my client. You mocked me in open court. This was always personal. You just didn't realize I fight better that way." When the judge took the bench, his eyes moved quickly across the report, then slower, then back again. "Mr. Wes Patterson said at last, tapping the paper, this is solid work. Thank you, Your Honor. And this video footage, your source public traffic camera, acquired lawfully through open records request. Patterson looked at the image still open on his tablet, the slowed frame of the envelope being handed off, and beside it, the scanned sketch by a 9-year-old girl. A child's crayon truth, standing shoulder to shoulder with federal surveillance. Who drew this, the judge asked. My daughter, sir. She's got an eye, Patterson muttered. Jason Cole rose his voice sharper than usual. Your Honor, this is circumstantial. Sit down, Mr. Cole. The gavel hit once. Hard. Based on this evidence, I'm issuing a temporary suspension of all testimony from Mr. Smalls until further review. The court will also be subpoenaing Mr. Reynolds for deposition next week under penalty of perjury. Cole sat slowly, pale, shaken, and for the first time silent. After the hearing, Caleb took Emma to the local diner, just the two of them, tucked in a corner booth beneath the hum of flickering neon. He ordered her a chocolate milkshake with extra whipped cream. She swirled it with her straw content, kicking her feet beneath the table. Did my drawing help? She asked between sips. It did, he said. Like, really help. Like probably change the course of a lawsuit kind of help. Emma grinned. Cool. He reached across the table and took her hand. You saw something no one else did. You paid attention. And you told the truth. She looked down, suddenly shy. Do you think Mom would be proud? His heart caught in his throat. He nodded. Yeah, Em. I think she'd be really proud. And in that moment, as the neon light washed over their little corner of the world, Caleb realized something he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just fighting the system anymore. He was fighting for a future. Caleb West had learned long ago back in desert camps and courtroom tents under foreign skies that the most effective traps don't snap. They wait. Silently. Just long enough for the prey to step in, unaware it ever had a choice. And this time, the prey wore $1,000 suits and hid behind shell corporations. After the hearing that suspended Inspector Smalls, Caleb spent the next 48 hours assembling the final piece of his plan. He knew Reynolds' legal team would strike back. Desperation breeds recklessness, especially when people like Jason Cole start to feel the noose tighten. And Caleb wasn't just counting on it. He was betting everything on it. He called Aaron. I want to feed them something, he said. False intel. Not false, just incomplete. Just enough to make them act. Aaron whistled softly. Classic counterintelligence. Haven't seen that look in your eye since Kandahar. Yeah, Caleb said. Feels familiar. The next morning, Caleb submitted a sealed supplemental motion to the court, requesting a protective order for a confidential witness. It included vague references to internal emails and sealed bank transfers, none of which were real, but all of which looked real enough. He made sure to send one copy through the official channel and another accidentally attached to a less secure email to the court assistant, knowing full well that Cole's team had someone watching the docket. Then he waited. It took less than 24 hours. At exactly 6:37 p.m., an anonymous folder was submitted to the clerk's desk, new evidence introduced by the plaintiff's side, supposedly proving that Teresa Carter had falsified her maintenance requests and orchestrated the mold damage herself for sympathy. The documents were hastily assembled. Too hastily. The metadata showed they had been created just 2 hours after Caleb's confidential witness motion was submitted. Worse, the documents used formatting unique to a legal assistant on Cole's own team, one who had previously sent Caleb a discovery packet. Caleb stared at the folder in his hands, like a hunter recognizing his own bait, in the teeth of the beast that swallowed it. They'd taken it. Hook, line, and sinker. In court the next morning, Caleb let Jason Cole speak first. With the court's permission, Cole said, his tone smug again. We're submitting new evidence that directly challenges Ms. Carter's credibility and shows she manipulated evidence to sway the court's sympathy. He placed the folder on the clerk's desk like a magician revealing the final card. Judge Patterson raised an eyebrow. "This is new material." "Yes, Your Honor." "Just surfaced. Whistleblower submission." Caleb stood slowly. Permission to respond. Patterson nodded. "Granted." Caleb walked to the podium with the folder in hand. He opened it deliberately, flipped to the second page and held it up. "Your Honor." "May I draw your attention to the footer?" Patterson squinted. "I see." "A time stamp. Correct," Caleb said. "The document claims to have originated months ago, but the footer shows it was created at 9:12 p.m. last night." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jason Cole stiffened. "And if you look at the file properties," Caleb continued, "you'll find that the author tag is still embedded. It matches documents previously submitted by Mr. Cole's paralegal Sharon Gentry." Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. Caleb wasn't done. "Furthermore," he said, holding up his own motion, "this evidence was only created after I filed this confidential witness motion information that had not yet been granted access through discovery." Patterson sat back slowly. "You're suggesting this was fabricated?" "I'm not suggesting, Your Honor." Caleb said, voice low but unwavering. "I'm stating it outright." He tapped the folder. "This isn't just unethical. It's an attempt to defraud the court." The room fell dead silent. Patterson looked at Cole. "Mr. Cole." "Do you have a response?" Cole stammered. I was given these by a source. I had no reason to question their validity." "And you didn't verify authorship," Patterson snapped. "Didn't notice the internal metadata linking it to your own office." Cole's face flushed. "No, sir." Patterson turned to the clerk. "Mark this folder as under investigation. Initiate an immediate audit of the plaintiff's submissions, and notify the State Bar." Then his gavel hit sharper than usual. "This court does not tolerate fabricated evidence. If it turns out this was orchestrated intentionally, Mr. Cole, you may be facing sanctions." Cole sat down like a man who'd just had the oxygen ripped from his lungs. After the session, Teresa stood beside Caleb outside the courtroom, steps shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would they fake all of that?" "Because they're losing," Caleb said quietly. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just looked tired. Then from the sidewalk, a familiar voice called out, "Hey, West." It was Lucas Harper, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the sidewalk like a man who never stopped calculating angles. Caleb approached him cautiously. "I saw the footage," Harper said. "You dropped that trap like a pro." "I had good instincts," Caleb replied. "Not just instincts," Harper said. "Conviction. That's rarer than people think." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This came through an old contact. Internal memo. "Reynolds is panicking. They're about to shift assets offshore. They think you've got the DA involved." "I do," Caleb said. "Or I will after this." Harper nodded. "You know this is the part where things get uglier, right?" Caleb exhaled. "They already are." That night at home, Emma sat on the floor with her sketch pad, while Caleb filled out new subpoenas one after another. A stack of legal files towered beside him. Emma crawled up onto the couch beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Are we still winning?" she asked. "We are," he said. "But the bad guys are still fighting harder than ever." Emma thought for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Does it make you tired?" Caleb looked down at her. "Every day. Then why keep going?" He ran his fingers through her hair gently and replied, "Because justice doesn't rest. And neither will I. Not while they still think they can cheat people like Teresa." She nodded. And in that moment, she wasn't just his daughter. She was his reason. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked past 11:42 p.m. Outside, the wind rustled through the old maple trees, lining the edge of Caleb West's small front yard. The porch light flickered once, casting long shadows across the wooden railing. Inside the house was still Emma had long gone to sleep, curled beside her sketchpad, a half-drawn courthouse scene resting beside her. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a stack of case files cross-referencing LLC registrations and timestamps. The latest court documents were spread across the surface like a battle plan, and in many ways that's exactly what it was. He heard it before he saw it. 2 slow knocks, then silence. Caleb rose instinctively, his hand brushing the inside of his jacket, not for a weapon, but out of old habit. He stepped quietly toward the front door, eyes narrowing. Through the peephole he saw Lucas Harper. No trench coat this time. No coffee, just a man standing alone in the dark, holding something in his hand. Caleb opened the door halfway. "You lost Lucas," let out a tired breath. You could say that. They stood for a moment, veterans of different wars, measuring each other with the silent weight that only men who've seen too much tend to carry. "Can I come in?" Caleb didn't answer right away. Then, with a slow nod, he stepped aside. The house smelled faintly of old wood printer ink and leftover soup. Lucas looked around, eyes lingering on the photos lining the bookshelf, one of Lena holding baby Emma, another of Caleb in uniform, a younger man in desert fatigues, with eyes far older than his years. "You lived a whole life before this," Lucas murmured. Caleb folded his arms. "We all did." Lucas held out the item in his hand, a small silver USB drive. "What's on it?" Caleb asked. Everything, Lucas said. Financials, internal memos, board emails, audio recordings, even surveillance footage of Reynolds with city officials, stuff I wasn't supposed to keep. Caleb hesitated. "Why now?" Lucas sat down at the table without waiting for permission. "Because I made a mistake," he said flatly. "I followed your daughter. That wasn't part of the job. That was a line. I crossed it." He looked up. "And I've been thinking about lines a lot lately." Caleb said nothing. Lucas continued, voice lower. "I signed up to expose liars, to follow cheating spouses and corporate thieves, not to help a slumlord put a mother and her kid out on the street." Caleb finally spoke. "What changed your mind?" Lucas looked him dead in the eye. "You." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Caleb sat opposite him, slipping the USB into his laptop. As files began to populate the screen, his expression didn't change, but his fingers slowed over the keyboard. Hundreds of documents. Dozens of flagged transactions. Bribes. Recorded phone calls. A photo of Reynolds shaking hands with the very judge who had dismissed a tenant's complaint 2 months ago. One file was labeled Internal Memo, Emergency Liquidation. Caleb opened it. Inside, a directive from Reynolds to shift assets, offshore restructure LLC holdings, and prepare for potential seizure action if legal pressure continued. Dated yesterday. Caleb leaned back. "They know the walls are closing. They're panicking," Lucas said. "And when men like Reynolds panic, they burn everything behind them." Caleb looked toward the hallway where Emma slept. His voice dropped. "Why are you risking this? You said it yourself, they have reach." Lucas looked down at his hands. "I used to have a daughter," he said quietly. "Her name was Grace. She would have been 10 this year." Caleb froze. Lucas's voice cracked just slightly. "Her mother moved to Oregon after we divorced. Said she couldn't trust me anymore. That I was always working for people I couldn't look her in the eye and explain." He stared at the wood grain of the table. "I never made it to Grace's last birthday. Didn't send a card. Didn't even call. Too busy tailing some executive's mistress." He looked up. "But last week I saw your little girl sketching the truth. No cameras, no briefing, just crayons. And it hit me. What am I doing with my life?" Caleb didn't speak. Didn't need to. He simply reached over and poured 2 glasses of water. Lucas picked his up, his hand trembling slightly. You ever get a second chance? West Caleb stared at the drive. I didn't. Lucas nodded slowly. Then maybe I'm giving you one. By 2:00 a.m., Caleb had backed up every file in triplicate. 1 copy would go to the DA in the morning. 1 would stay in his safe. The 3rd, that would go straight to the press if necessary. Lucas stood at the door, coat back on his shoulders, hunched like a man half expecting a bullet between his ribs. I can't stay, he said. They'll know I flipped. You have somewhere to go, Lucas nodded. Friend in Arizona, off-grid. Caleb extended his hand. Lucas stared at it for a beat, then took it. The handshake wasn't formal. It was silent absolution. And in the dim porch light, the 2 men parted, not as enemies, not even as allies, but as something rarer. 2 men who understood what it meant to fail and still choose to do right. Inside, Caleb turned off the porch light and locked the door. Then he walked down the hall and peeked in on Emma. She was asleep, arms wrapped around her sketch pad like it was a treasure. He smiled softly, then whispered the quietest of oaths. I'll finish this. For you. For her. For everyone they thought they could step on. He turned back to the flickering computer screen, where evidence glowed like embers. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he had peace. And that was enough to fight again. The storm didn't wait for thunder. It arrived quietly through court clerks, whispering in the hall, through sudden appearances of journalists at the courthouse steps, and through the stiff posture of Jason Cole as he stood at the plaintiff's table, sifting through documents like a drowning man reaching for dry land. Caleb West walked into the courtroom with calm purpose. He carried no briefcase, no expensive tablet, no entourage, just a worn black folder tucked under his arm, and the silent weight of knowing truth was finally on his side. The gallery was full. Spectators, reporters, a few city officials sitting in the back, pretending to be disinterested. The rumor had spread something big was about to drop. Judge Patterson entered with unusual silence. Even his gavel strike was subdued. We are reconvening on Carter vs. Reynolds Property Group, he announced. Mr. West, I understand you have evidence that warrants escalation. Caleb stood. Your Honor, I do. He stepped forward and handed the clerk a new binder, thicker, heavier. Inside are over 50 documents, including financial records, internal memos, offshore wire transfers, and recorded communications that point to a pattern of fraudulent activity by Reynolds Property Group and its affiliated shell companies. Jason Cole immediately stood. Objection, Your Honor. We've not reviewed these materials. Patterson held up a hand. You'll have your chance, Mr. Cole. Sit down. Cole obeyed, jaw tight. Caleb continued. The evidence also includes a timeline showing these shell companies, 8 in total, were used to illegally shift ownership of rent-controlled buildings and bypass both taxation and tenant protections. He paused, then added, We also have recorded audio in which Mr. Reynolds admits to orchestrating fraudulent evictions under the guise of capital upgrades. These upgrades never occurred. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Patterson's eyes sharpened. You're accusing the plaintiff of wire fraud and tax evasion. I'm not accusing him. Your Honor, Caleb said steadily. I'm proving it. The clerk played the audio on a small speaker. Reynolds's voice was unmistakable, smug, careless, too confident. Just cycle them out, man. Say it's mold. Say it's electrical. Doesn't matter. Once they're out, flip the lease to Bexford Holdings. Rent jumps 80%. We split the profit. Don't worry, we've got city housing in our pocket. The room erupted in murmurs. Patterson struck his gavel. Order. Jason Cole tried to speak again. Your Honor, This recording lacks chain of custody. I personally received the file from a licensed investigator, Caleb said, along with these wire transfer receipts that match the dates and companies mentioned. He laid out the final piece Lucas Harper's flash drive printed and documented. Patterson reviewed it in silence, his fingers tapping slowly against the bench. Then, without looking up, he said, "Clerk, notify the district attorney's office." Jason Cole froze. Effective immediately, Patterson continued all assets held by Reynolds Property Group and its subsidiaries are to be frozen under temporary judicial hold pending criminal investigation. The words fell like thunder. In addition, the judge added, "Mr. Reynolds is to appear for federal deposition within 72 hours. If he fails to comply, a bench warrant will be issued." Jason Cole rose, panic now in his voice. "Your Honor, we object to sit down." Patterson's gavel hit the desk like the closing of a cell door. Caleb turned slowly and looked back at Teresa Carter sitting near the rear of the courtroom. She clutched her son's hand, tears rolling down her face silently. No applause followed, just silence. But it wasn't the silence of intimidation this time. It was the silence of shock giving way to justice. Outside, the sky had darkened. Clouds swirled above the courthouse, and a few droplets began to fall cold, clean purifying. Reporters swarmed, but Caleb didn't stop to speak. He walked down the steps alone, head lowered slightly, heart pounding. On the sidewalk, Emma stood waiting. Her raincoat zipped to her chin, her sketch pad clutched tightly in both arms. He knelt beside her. "It's done," he said. "Did we win?" "We did." She pulled something from the sketch pad and handed it to him. It was a new drawing, simpler than the others. Just 3 figures, a little girl, a woman, and a man holding a shield made of law books. Above it, in shaky cursive, she had written, "Truth protects." Caleb smiled, eyes misting. Behind him, thunder rolled across the sky. But he wasn't afraid of storms anymore. He'd walked through worse. And now he carried light. The courtroom felt different now. Not quieter. Not louder. Just different. The air no longer held the smug weight of doubt, no longer buzzed with sideways glances or whispered mockery. Instead, there was a stillness, like the collective exhale of a room that had just seen the truth with its own eyes and couldn't unsee it. Caleb West sat at the table alone, a half-drunk cup of coffee beside him, and no files in front of him. He wasn't here to argue today. He had already won. The real battle, the one beneath the surface of legal filings and statutes, had been fought and decided. And what remained now was reflection. Judge Ronald Patterson entered the courtroom without fanfare. For the first time, his robe didn't feel like armor. It hung from his shoulders, like the weight of a position he no longer took for granted. He looked older than he had the week before, more human. He adjusted his glasses, sat down, and didn't reach for the gavel. Instead, he folded his hands and looked directly at Caleb. "Mr. West," he began, his voice lower than usual, stripped of all theater. "Before we proceed with administrative wrap-up, I'd like to speak not as a judge, but as a man who has served the bench for over 3 decades. Caleb met his gaze calmly. "Go ahead, Your Honor." Patterson inhaled slowly. "I've seen men walk into this courtroom with loud voices and flashy suits, men who knew the law inside and out, men who won on technicalities and lost on ethics. But I've rarely seen a man walk in here armed with nothing but truth, a folder, and a moral compass sharper than any legal code." He paused. "When you first appeared before me, I dismissed you. I mocked you. Not because you weren't qualified, but because I assumed a man who had stepped away from the system must have done so out of failure." His voice caught just slightly. "I see now. It was grief and integrity." The gallery was still. "You stood up not for profit, not for politics, but for a mother no one else would fight for. And in doing so, you uncovered a network of corruption that has now drawn the attention of the District Attorney's Office, the Housing Ethics Commission, and the IRS. He let the silence hang, then stood from the bench and did something no one expected. He stepped down, walked slowly across the floor of the courtroom, and stopped directly in front of Caleb. "I've never done this before," he said. "But perhaps I should have, a long time ago." He extended his hand. "Mr. West." "Caleb." "I was wrong." Caleb stood slowly. He took the judge's hand, not out of pride, not out of victory, but out of something older, something simpler. "Respect," Patterson added softly. "You are not just a lawyer. You are not just a father. You are a man of justice. And this courtroom, my courtroom, is better for having known your name." Behind them, Teresa Carter wiped her eyes. Her son clung to her coat, sensing the shift in the room, but not yet understanding its weight. In the back row, a few members of the press lowered their cameras. Somehow, snapping a photo of that handshake felt disrespectful. Some moments are meant to be witnessed, not captured. Later that day, Caleb stepped out onto the courthouse steps and found Emma sitting on the stone ledge by the flagpole legs, swinging sketch pad in her lap as always. She looked up when she saw him. "You didn't bring your folder?" she said. "Didn't need it." "Did you win again?" He smiled. This time it wasn't about winning. She tilted her head. "Then what was it about?" He sat beside her, letting the wind blow past them. "It was about someone seeing me for who I really am, and finally saying it out loud." Emma thought for a moment. "Like how I see you?" He turned to her, surprised. "Yes," he said, "exactly like that." She grinned and flipped her sketchpad around. The drawing showed a courtroom. In the center, Caleb. But this time he wasn't alone. On one side stood Teresa and her son. On the other, Emma. Behind them, the American flag and the judge's bench. And rising from the center of the room was a beam of light. At the top, in a child's print, "Truth wins quietly." He took the sketchpad, gently running his thumb across the page. "I think this one's your best," he said. She shrugged. "I had a good story to draw from." They sat in silence as the wind rustled the pages. Caleb didn't need applause. He didn't need headlines. He had his daughter's eyes, and his own peace. And after everything, that was more than enough. The courthouse victory didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a door cracking open. And on the other side of that door stood others. Dozens, maybe hundreds, just like Teresa Carter. People stuck in the gears of a machine, too big, too quiet, and too cruel to face alone. At first, Caleb West tried to return to normal. He fixed a dishwasher, rewired a porch light, even cleaned out an old attic for a neighbor who paid him in homemade peach pie. For a moment, the rhythm of wrenches and wood felt like peace. But peace has a funny way of asking questions when you stop moving. And one night, while organizing files for storage, he found a stack of letters tucked in the back of his inbox, all forwarded from the court, all handwritten, all desperate. "Dear Mr. West, I heard what you did for that woman in Los Angeles. I'm 74, a retired school bus driver. They're trying to evict me for having too many plants on my balcony. Mr. West, I'm a single father of 2. I can't read legal documents well. They say I missed a signature, and now we're losing our home. Please, if you're reading this, we don't have money for lawyers. Can you help?" They came from Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, even Texas. And Caleb sat in silence, holding them one by one, like tiny paper lifelines, each waiting for someone, anyone, to pull them back to safety. The next day, Aaron Reyes showed up at Caleb's door unannounced, carrying 2 laptops and a box labeled Phase 1. "What's this?" Caleb asked. Aaron grinned. "The start of your real job. I already have one? No, Aaron said. You had one. Now you have a calling. Caleb folded his arms. I didn't sign up for a movement. Aaron dropped the box on the kitchen table. Movements don't care. They sign up for you. It started small. Caleb rented a single room in an old veterans center, dusty, underused, with a window that didn't quite close. He furnished it with second-hand desks, donated coffee, and a folding chair Emma insisted on painting with stars. Aaron handled the tech website intake forms, secure encrypted storage. Emma named it the Justice Collective. We don't need to be big, she said. We just need to be brave. They began by taking 3 cases, a disabled veteran being sued for damages he didn't cause, an elderly immigrant couple misled by a predatory loan, and a single mother being evicted while her landlord renovated using forged permits. Each one felt like lifting a truck off someone's chest. Caleb worked long hours sometimes past midnight, but this time it wasn't for survival, it was for meaning. One afternoon, Teresa stopped by the new office with a homemade casserole. You look thinner, she said, eyeing him suspiciously. I've been skipping lunch. You've been skipping everything. She set the dish down and looked around. This place. It's amazing. Caleb glanced around the room, walls covered in case timeline stacks of manila folders waiting for action. Emma's hand-drawn signs taped next to legal printouts. It's chaos, he muttered. Teresa smiled. It's justice. In motion. She paused. Why didn't you do this sooner? He hesitated. Because it meant becoming someone I thought I left behind. And now he looked at her. Now it means becoming someone my daughter can believe in. As the weeks passed, volunteers trickled in, veterans, retired paralegals, even a former judge who'd read about Caleb in a local newspaper, and drove down from Bakersfield just to shake his hand. They brought what they had time-hard experience. And from those humble scraps, something real began to form. Not a nonprofit, not a law firm, a refuge for people who thought no one would ever fight for them. One night, Emma sat at the corner desk, drawing while Caleb reviewed a lease violation case. She looked up suddenly. Are you going to keep doing this forever? Caleb looked over, surprised by the question. Why do you ask? She shrugged. Just wondering. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Forever is a long time. Emma smiled. Then maybe just until the world learns how to be fair again. Caleb laughed softly. I like that. She looked back down at her sketch pad and said almost too quietly to hear Mom would have loved this place. The words hit him like a wave, sharp, cold, and strangely warm. He didn't respond for a long time. Then he whispered, I hope so. By the end of the month, the Justice Collective had taken on 11 active cases. They hadn't won them all yet, but they had shown up. And sometimes showing up was the revolution. On the wall above the main desk, Caleb hung a frame with one quote, handwritten in Emma's purple crayon. Justice isn't something you wait for. It's something you become. He looked at it every morning before starting the day, and every night before locking the door. The sun was low over the hills that cradled the quiet edge of town, casting a soft gold across the porch, where Caleb West sat, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He watched as Emma pedaled her bicycle slowly down the gravel drive. No rush, no wobble, just the steady rhythm of a child who finally felt safe. Safe to ride, safe to laugh, safe to belong. Behind him, the screen door creaked open, and the scent of toast drifted out from the kitchen. He didn't move, didn't need to. The world for once wasn't pulling him in every direction. It was still. And in that stillness, Caleb didn't feel the need to be a warrior or a lawyer or a shield. He was just a father. Sitting on an old wooden step in a house that still creaked when the wind blew hard. And that, for now, was enough. The small house had changed since the trial ended, not in decoration or paint or even furniture, but in spirit. There was laughter now, a new kind, not forced, not meant to cover the silence, just honest, unhurried moments between emails and court filings and grilled cheese sandwiches at 8 p.m. The Justice Collective was growing, slowly, one referral at a time, one story at a time, one voice finding courage at a time. Caleb had learned to say no to the cameras, to the podcasts, to the sudden wave of book deals and TV options that landed in his inbox with subject lines like America's quiet hero. He didn't need a pedestal. He needed a purpose. And purpose, he discovered, wasn't always loud. That morning he had received a message. Simple. No subject line. Just a woman's name, Maria Santiago, and a brief note: tenant in El Paso. 2 kids. Landlord shut off water during heat wave. Retaliation after she filed a code complaint. She heard about you. Said, he helps people who don't get listened to. Attached was a photo. A brown-skinned woman in a tank top, sweat on her forehead, holding her baby beside a broken faucet. Caleb had stared at the photo for a long time, then opened his laptop. Ari Santiago case, El Paso. He typed, "Send me everything you've got. We'll help." Emma rode back up the driveway, her cheeks flushed pink, her ponytail bouncing. She skidded to a stop and hopped off her bike, walking it up to the porch. "I almost went past the mailbox today," she beamed. "Almost," Caleb teased. "I got nervous. You'll get there." She leaned the bike against the railing and plopped down beside him. "You working today always?" She wrinkled her nose. Even on Saturdays, he sipped his coffee. "Justice doesn't keep weekends." Emma nodded like she understood completely. Then after a moment, she asked, "Do you think people ever stop needing help?" Caleb looked out at the trees, swaying gently in the breeze. "No," he said. "But I think they stop feeling alone when someone shows up." She smiled, then her eyes lit up as she remembered something and reached into her jacket pocket. "I made you something." It was a small button pin, handmade, crooked edges marker ink still slightly smudged. In the center, a pair of scales drawn in purple and gold. Below it, 3 words written in her unmistakable handwriting. 1 step more. He ran his thumb over it. "Where'd you get this idea?" She shrugged. "You always say that. When things are hard. 1 step more." So I thought, maybe it should be your thing. Caleb chuckled softly. "My thing, huh?" She nodded. He pinned it to his chest. Not next to any badge or ribbon or rank, he had none left. Just a hand-drawn pin from a girl who saw him clearer than anyone ever had. That night after dinner, Caleb walked out to the front porch again. He stood under the stars, watching the quiet flicker of a neighbor's porch light 2 houses down. Somewhere, a dog barked. A car passed in the distance. Crickets chirped, as if trying to fill the world with just enough sound so no one felt forgotten. He checked his phone one last time. 3 new emails, 2 case updates, and 1 message with the subject line. "We heard what you did for Los Angeles. We could use someone like you here in Kentucky." Caleb smiled, not because he had all the answers, but because for once he knew where to begin. He typed slowly, "Tell me what happened. We'll figure it out." Then he turned off the porch light, went inside, and prepared to rise again the next day, not as a hero, not as a legend, but as a man who had chosen over and over to be just enough. 1 voice, 1 file, 1 courtroom, 1 daughter's drawing, 1 step at a time. We'd love to know where in the world are you watching from your comments. Truly inspire us. And it's always amazing to see how far stories of kindness and courage can reach. If this story moved, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Moments. Story, your support helps us keep telling heartfelt tales that remind us all of the quiet heroes around us. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, one act of courage can change everything.